The Russia-Ukraine crisis has come home for India as an Indian student has been killed in the conflict, and others are reported missing as young Indian students walk on foot to try and get out of Ukraine. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Let's take a look at the developments of this unfolding global crisis. Russia's foreign minister is saying that if there is a World War III, it will be nuclear and it will be destructive. The fighting is raging on. Missiles are now falling on the town of Kharkiv. For India, this is now personal. An Indian student has been killed and thousands of others are trying to escape Ukraine on foot. India is asking for a humanitarian safe passage. Russia has promised to investigate the death of the Indian student Naveen Shekharappa. We have, of course, been hearing Ukraine's perspective, but today on the program, let's get a perspective from Moscow. Anton Anisimov, the editor-in-chief of the Sputnik, is alive with us, and we're going across to him in just a moment to ask him whether he is at all hopeful that this could stop before it all gets catastrophic, not just for Ukraine and Russia, but for much of the world. Thank you very much, Anton Anisimov, for your time today. Appreciate your taking out the time in what must be a crazy busy news cycle, if nothing else. Let me start by asking you for your appraisal of the overall situation. We've had claims from Ukraine and from Zelenskyy that 6,000 Russian lives have been lost. I'm sure Russia has a very different perspective of the same situation. Please go ahead.
First of all, thank you for having me. And if I may begin, I'm deeply sorry about the loss of an Indian student. The loss of life is always tragic. But the tragic situation in Ukraine has been developing for years now. I mean, what we're seeing now is not something that just happened. It is something, the situation has been developing for the past 8 years at least, when the bombardments of Ukraine's eastern regions of Donbass and Lugansk started. What we're dealing here right now, I'll proceed to answer your question, but just to give some background, what we're dealing here right now is a military operation, because I know that many Western media outlets have been claiming that there's a war going on. As a matter of fact, it is a military operation because Russia has not declared a war on Ukraine. As a matter of fact, we see Ukrainian people as our brotherly nation, and it's been so for many years. Like, another popular misconception that I feel people have in the world right now is that the entire Ukraine is united to confront Russia at this very moment. But Ukraine has been a very, very divided country. As you know, many people in Ukraine speak Russian. They're basically Russian-speaking people living in Ukraine. And after what's been happening in Donbass, also after the some laws were introduced by the Ukrainian government, especially in the years 2017, 2019, laws restricting the use of the Russian language among the Russian-speaking population. Like, you can't get proper education in school in Russian, for example. And many media outlets in Ukraine have been forced to switch to English. Otherwise, they just need to close. That's very, very, this is very tragic. It's a very tragic thing. And so it's a very hard restriction, really. Now, as I know, India is bilingual. You have 2 state languages, and Russian used to be a state language in Ukraine as well. So imagine a certain political party or a certain political force banning one of your languages, either be it Hindi or be it English. That is a very repressive measure.
Can I jump in there? Firstly, we have multiple languages, but I hear the point you're trying to make. You're saying that Russian, the language was being curtailed. But may I ask you, if this is not a war and if it is a military operation, why has military action extended beyond the separatist regions that Russia began with recognizing and giving legitimacy to? We're actually seeing the military attack places like Kharkiv. We're seeing missiles fall. We're seeing civilian establishments targeted as well. The Indian student who died was standing in queue at a grocery store, and eyewitness accounts say that that Russian shelling is what took him out. It took his life.
That is a very complicated question. It will take me a while to answer it, and I hope I remember the entirety of it correctly by the time I finish. But just to say, if you're saying if it's not a war but a military operation, why didn't Russian forces stop with Donbass, with the Donbass region?
Yes.
As you may well know, Donetsk and the Lugansk regions have declared their independence, but it did not stop military operations coming from Ukraine. It did not stop Nazi battalions. And when I'm saying Nazi battalions, it may sound like I'm a Russian propaganda mouthpiece, and I understand that. But if you look at the Western media, they've been writing about Nazi battalions in Ukraine for years now. And I'm talking big media outlets like The Guardian or Reuters or The Intercept or The Vice. Many American and European media outlets have been writing for years now that there are Nazi battalions operating in Ukraine. Everybody knew that, but nobody cared to intervene. Now,
but Mr. Zelenskyy, whom Mr. Putin wants out, is a Jew. So how can he be a Nazi leader? And bombs have fallen on a Holocaust memorial, as you well know.
That is a very good question. And I think that is a question that you need to ask Mr. Zelenskyy himself, because when I'm speaking about Nazi battalions, I mean Azov, the Azov battalion, which is very notorious, which has a certain chevron, which is like an exact copy of the Waffen-SS chevron of the 2nd Tank Division. The Azov battalion, you can Google it. I mean, anybody listening to this now can Google it and find them for themselves. They have been operating in Ukraine, and everybody knows that. But nobody seemed to care until Russia had to act, until Russia had to intervene. Now, just coming back to your question, why didn't Russia stop with the Donbass and the Lugansk region? As you may well know, military facilities are spread across the entire country. Now, if you stop at Donbass, it's only a matter of time when military facilities and military personnel from other regions is moving closer to the Donbass region, and they're like a full-blown war will start affecting civilian population in those two regions, which have been battered for the last 8 years. Now, Russian investigation committee say they have at least 14,000 cases confirmed that what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. That suggests there's been a genocide going on based on the language criteria, genocide against the Russian population. So just in order to make it as safe as possible, Russian military and Russian military aviation have been bombarding military infrastructure, and only military infrastructure. Now
you're saying civilians are not being targeted, but we've seen images, and they've come into us, of course, from people in Ukraine, and we can bring them up now, of civilians actually standing up and arguing with Russian soldiers, standing in front of tanks, children actually spending nights in bomb bunkers. If we can please play those pictures. But go ahead, Anton, respond.
Yes, please.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, do I comment on this?
Yes.
Now,
you're saying only military facilities are being targeted, but we've seen pictures of civilians standing up against Russian troops. And if your invasion is so popular, why are the Ukrainian people not supporting you? In fact, there have been anti-war protests in Russia itself.
Now, two things. Your question says that the civilians are being targeted by the Russian military, but the footage that you're using right now does not suggest that Russian military is in conflict. Like, it's not shooting people in the images that you're showing. That is one thing. Now, when you're saying that civilians are being targeted, I say that Ukraine is a divided nation. I can say as many times as you need, because the nation is very, very divided. And the reports coming from Ukraine right now, and Russia has many war correspondents right now working on the spot. And we know that not everybody in Ukraine is happy with what's going on, but a certain part of the population, and it's a pretty big part. And I'm getting reports, like I do have subscribers on social media, and I'm getting letters from the towns of Kiev, Kharkiv, and Mariupol, and pretty much everywhere in Ukraine. This is the tragic thing. People are so divided that half the population was waiting for this for 8 years, for what's happening, for what Russia is doing right now. But obviously, the half of population, another half of population is against it. But as you see on the footage that you're showing again, Russian military do not confront civilians, because we see Ukrainians as our brotherly nation. Like, why would the Russian military confront them when they'll remain our neighbor? After this is over, they will remain our neighbor. Do we want the entire country to hate us? No, we don't. Now, one last thing, just in regards to your question regarding the Ukrainian population. You know how many people migrate from Ukraine to Russia yearly? We're talking hundreds of thousands of people. Like, in the past 30 years, I think around 7 million people fled Ukraine. Well, they left Ukraine for another country. So are we really talking about a prosperous country that everybody's happy with?
Yeah, but can I ask you to comment on the anti-war protests? We have footage of that as well. The anti-war protests that have taken place within Russia. Some of your sporting legends have stood up while sort of on tournament and said no to war. So many of your most famous athletes have done this. We've seen those images of people flooding the streets, not just across Europe, but in Russia itself. And the other question that I have is that if indeed the Ukrainian people are your brothers, as you call them, then they would be supporting this military action. Instead, we have seen women sometimes standing in front of Russian tanks, singular people arguing, civilians arguing with Russian troops. If this military operation is popular, why are there these anti-war protests taking place?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that this military population is popular. I'll repeat myself once again. I say that the population of Ukraine is now very divided in two big groups. One is very pro-Russian, and you can know that for a fact because Russian people have many relatives living in Ukraine, and people from Ukraine have been migrating to Russia for years now. They stay here and they work here. There's a huge Ukrainian diaspora, the diaspora in Russia. So a part of the population is against what is happening right now. Part of the population is pro-Russian, is very pro-Russian, and they're sending reports that they've been waiting for what is happening for 8 years now under this government, living with the Nazi battalions in their country. So as far as protests in Russia are concerned, now, first of all, they have not been violent. Like the second, as you know, like any country, people in any country have different opinions about what is happening, be it political matters or economic matters or cultural matters for that fact. So Russian society as well, just like any other society on this planet, is not a monolith. Yeah. But we're seeing hundreds of people, and by the way, most of the people that have been detained, they have not even been accused, they have not been arrested. Most of them were released, especially children.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you? You said when this ends, or the Ukrainians will still be our brothers. The Ukrainian nation will still be our brotherly nation. Yeah. What is the end game here? Russia's foreign minister has gone on record today to say if there's a World War III, it will be nuclear and destructive. Russia has put its nuclear systems, nuclear deterrent systems on alert. Isn't this a kind of saber rattling, a kind of warning of a possible nuclear threat, so that the rest of the world backs off?
Now, first of all, I think we both understand that if there is a nuclear, if the Third World War happens, which nobody wants, because it is basically the end of the world. Like this, if it happens, this could be like the last interview we both conduct, and nobody wants that. I think we all agree to that. So the Russian military decree, it allows Russia to launch preemptive nuclear strikes when it sees a threat to its sovereignty, to its not only national interest, but to its sovereignty, to the nation itself. It does not mean that Russia is going to use them unless not even provoked severely, but attacked. And we've been hearing from some of the Western governments that they're willing to supply Ukraine with arms, that they're willing to send personnel to Ukraine. There have been conflicting reports, but just in case, everybody understands that Russia is a nuclear superpower, and when threatened, what else do we have to do?
But why are we talking at all about nuclear options or nuclear war right now? Isn't that irresponsible?
No. I'm saying that there have been reports coming from Western governments that they're willing to support Ukraine militarily.
No,
They're
I
willing
heard
to.
that. I heard that. I know that Ukraine has been assisted with weapons, but I'm saying
Yeah.
conventional war is very different from nuclear war. Why is Russia referencing nuclear war at all? That's what I'm asking.
Why is Russia referencing nuclear war? Because everybody, like, Russia is referencing nuclear war because I think everybody's kind of expecting a nuclear war to happen right now, which is not going to happen. It won't be Russia who starts a nuclear war. I mean, if
So
we're
who would
saying,
it
like,
be? So who would it be?
well, I don't know. I certainly hope nobody. But now, just to explain a certain thing, you know that Russian military capabilities are far greater than any other nation in Europe. It's pretty much like the biggest nuclear arsenal is the one that Russia possesses, both Russia and the United States. So why are we talking about this? Like, when two big superpowers, not even two big superpowers, but we were talking about the European Union as well. When superpowers collide, the world kind of shivers. Everybody is afraid that it may end in a nuclear war. But I'm saying certainly it's not going to be Russia who starts it, because you need to, like, seriously, you need to try to invade Russia to start a nuclear war with Russia. I
There's a
certainly hope.
perception. Yeah, I just don't know why the Russian foreign minister would talk about the dangers of a nuclear war. But let's move on. There's a sense that Russia and Ukraine are talking while all of this is happening. What do you think will end this conflict from a Russian perspective? Is this about regime change? Is this about replacing or getting Zelenskyy out of office? What is it about?
No, and by the way, just yesterday, Vladimir Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, said that the regime change is not on the. We see President Zelenskyy as a legitimate president of Ukraine right now. That's what he said. That's an official Russian stance, and everybody needs to understand it. Like, 3 main points that Russia is making with the military operation there in Ukraine is demilitarization, denazification, and the end of genocide in the eastern part of Ukraine. 3 main points, and that's it. Basically, the best case scenario right now is that the Nazi battalions lay down their weapons and the war is basically over. Because now, when I'm saying Nazi battalions, I don't mean regular army. There are two different things in Ukraine, because there are like regular forces and Nazi battalions. It's mostly like a private militia almost. So that is why, in the first few days and up until now, hundreds of Ukraine's military personnel has been surrendering to Russia, and they're being fed and they're being kept in good conditions, and everybody knows that.
You said when the sort of Nazi reference is used, it's not used for President Zelensky because he is, of course, Jewish. But you did not answer the question of why a Holocaust memorial was targeted by Russian shelling.
I'm sorry, the Holocaust memorial was targeted by Russian shell. Could you show the footage of that? I'm just like.
This is what we've read. This is what we've read. This is what we've read. This is what we've read.
Where did you read that?
In multiple international publications. Are you denying it? I'm happy to take your denial on record if you think it's not true.
Wait, I'm just saying that I haven't seen those publications, and that would be, that would be a proper way if you give me an attribution. Like, if there's a certain media outlet that writes that Russia has been bombing memorials to Holocaust, which, by the way, memorials of Holocaust have been defiled in Ukraine for years now by Nazis, not by Russia. Because, like, when it comes to genocide, when it comes to Holocaust, it's a very painful thing for Russians too, because there are many people from Jewish origins are living in Russia still and used to live there. And Russia and Israel, the modern Israel, the Jewish population, are among the most hard-hit nations in the course of the World War II. Now, we're saying, like, Jewish Holocaust is a grave tragedy, but 26 million Soviet people died in the World War II. And this is, I don't know. This is so weird. I have to explain this at this point.
Yeah,
because
I've actually asked my producers to pull out where we read this, and that'll be coming up on your screen in a moment. So you'll have some attribution. But please do go ahead and complete your point while they're doing that. Please go ahead and complete your point.
Please, yes.
Yeah.
The second thing, in the Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking media landscape, there's there's so much fake news happening right now, and we're talking like video edits, and people are using footage from different conflicts, and everybody blames the other side at this very moment. That we cannot be certain. We cannot say that the exact shell came from Russia or from Ukraine, because Ukraine uses Soviet and Russian military equipment. They've been upgrading it, but we have basically, they have the same equipment that we have, but like previous versions of it. So it's very hard to tell who is conducting these atrocities at this very moment. But certainly, Russia would not be doing. But certainly, again, Russia would not be doing that. And Russia, like if you've seen how Russian troops advance, we don't bomb the cities. We don't bomb the cities like the Russian Federation does not bomb the cities the way like the Americans would do in Iraq or Libya or Syria, when the entire city is being obliterated. That's not what Russia does. Really, the biggest problem right now, as we see it, is Ukraine and Ukrainian government and Ukraine military should help organize humanitarian.
I'm just
seeing a picture.
There it is. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to show you, this is the Guardian that wrote about it, because you'd asked me where I read this. So I'm just giving you one example of where I read about the attack on the Holocaust memorial. But this, of course, is being attributed to Ukraine, but published in the Guardian. But please go ahead. I just wanted to show you an example of where I read this.
Is this attributed to President Zelenskyy? I might have missed some news. Does President Zelenskyy claim that we are bombing Holocaust memorials?
That this particular memorial that was bombed was as a result of Russian shelling is the Ukrainian claim from Mr. Zelenskyy, President Zelenskyy, yes.
Well, if it's attributed to President Zelenskyy, that many things that President Zelenskyy has been saying so far have not been true. So
can we step back before we get into a he said, as you said, it's impossible to tell in a conflict. You're clearly saying where the shell came from. Okay. Yes. How does this end?
Well, the best case scenario, as I was starting to explain, the best case scenario is that the Ukrainian army and the Nazi battalions lay down their weapons and help organize humanitarian corridors, at least from the cities, so that civilians can leave the city, like leave it between the military forces of Russia and Ukraine, leave the conflict between them for now. Because, and it's even been stated by our president that we're not even against the regular forces of Ukraine. We're against exactly the Nazi battalions. And I'm talking about battalions like Azov and Aidar. If you can Google it, I will advise you to do that, because we need to both understand what we're talking about here.
Okay. Can I ask you a last question? These talks, are you hopeful that these talks will go anywhere?
He's hopeful. Everybody, both in Russia and Ukraine, is hopeful that these talks lead to peace, because I think in the end, and since we're seeing President Zelenskyy as a legitimate president, we're not in there, like my country is not in there to overthrow the government in no way. It's been stated openly and officially. We do not need a proxy regime there, just something that, again, Western powers would probably see it as a befitting end for this conflict, just leave a proxy regime there. But no, like once the conflict is over, once the Nazi battalions are destroyed, the Ukraine leaves as it is, and they kind of have another open and fair election. But just like the Nazi battalions, like the Nazi part is what's important here, because I'm just, once again, I repeat 3 points, like denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine, and the end of genocide in eastern Ukraine.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Anton Anisimov, the editor-in-chief of the Sputnik, and we will reconnect with you as we keep a close eye on these developments. That is the Russian perspective on the crisis that is unfolding and has the world by tenterhooks. Thank you very much, Mr. Anisimov, and to our audience, see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.